And thank you so much, and welcome everybody to our panel today as we discuss the power of a diverse workforce. I am pleased to join you virtually as we discuss this very important topic. And allow me to introduce to you the three panelists that will have join us as well. First, let me welcome to our virtual stage Miss Barbara Dugas-Patterson, the Managing Director, CAO, Site Services Executive for JPMorgan Chase. Barbara, thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. And would you mind telling everybody a little bit about your position in the bank and what you do for JPMorgan Chase?
Yeah, absolutely. I run a group called Site Services, which is a group of site managers around the world globally at our largest hubs for our employees. And recently, in the last couple of months, I've expanded my remit to include global supplier diversity for the firm. So the group that focuses on increasing doing business with diverse businesses. I'm also passionate about diversity initiatives, so I think that's why I'm here today. I'm a former global co-chair of our Women's Interactive Network for the firm, former co-sponsor of the Black Executive Forum, and just always out there with my heart on my sleeve, trying to create a better workplace, better diverse communities, and just make a difference.
That is excellent. Thank you again for joining us. Also joining us today is Anna Coye from National Financial Services Industry Leader Wipfli. Anna, thank you for joining us as well.
Thanks, Adam, and glad to join everybody here, albeit virtually. Wish we were all together, hopefully someday soon. As Adam mentioned, my name's Anna Coye. I am a partner with Wipfli, a public accounting firm. I'm out of our Chicago office, although we have offices both nationally, across the footprint nationally, as well as internationally. I lead our financial services practice. And I also sit on the DEI council for our firm. Similar to Barbara, I'm very strong advocate and voice for DEI diverse groups, because what we can do with diverse groups is so much more than what we can do if we don't have diverse groups. And so I look forward to having further discussion with you today. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you for joining us. And then finally joining our panel is Mickey Goldwasser, the VP Marketing and Chief of Staff for Payrailz. Mickey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And it's interesting, here we are virtually and everybody talks about a new normal. I like to talk about the now normal. So this is how we can get together and talk about topics of interest, and diversity being one of them. I'm a 30-year veteran in the financial services industry, serving both banks and credit unions. Payrailz right now, where I work, we're a digital payments company. Our whole thing is about making the payments process smarter. I have an interesting role, is that I'm VP of Marketing. So how do I talk externally to the world? And then as Chief of Staff, one of my key really responsibilities is employee morale. I'm kind of the chief cheerleader, if we have anything to say. And I'm a firm believer that diversity really plays a key role in our success here at Payrailz. So I'm very happy to be able to join everybody. This is a very important topic that the timing's just right? Where we have to keep talking about these things. And again, I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. So it's kind of a little bit of an icebreaker. I always like to ask my panelists to give us kind of one fun fact about yourself that maybe people don't know. Mickey, why don't you start us off with that? Kind of that one fact that maybe somebody wouldn't realize just by looking at your bio.
Well, it's interesting. So as an introvert who forces themselves to be an extrovert, I'm actually a justice of the peace. And about 2 weeks ago, I was an officiant at a wedding on the beach. So it's kind of something, if you really want to put yourself out there, officiate a wedding.
There you go. I love it. Anna, how about yourself?
Yeah, so prior to joining Wipfli, so I've been leading the firm's FS practice, like I mentioned, for the last 2 years. But before I joined Wipfli, I was with a really small firm by the name of Deloitte & Touche for over 20 years in the financial services practice. But the interesting part is I have 4 children, 5th grade up through college, and they all were born in a different state. So go figure that.
Nice. Nice. How about for you, Barbara?
Well, for me, Adam, I don't think that most people that know me would consider me a risk taker, but for my 50th birthday, I decided to celebrate by jumping out of an airplane. So it was something I wanted to do since my 20s, and I thought if I don't hit it on at 50, I am going to miss it. So my family thought I was a little nuts. I have 3 children. My boys at the time were in junior high and high school, and they wanted to go with me, but they all celebrated as I came down, and I lived through it. And I loved it, by the way. So
that's awesome. So as you see, we have a diverse panel, not just in who we are and our backgrounds, but also just in our personal lives too. So this is fantastic. So let's jump right into kind of the heart of the heart of this. One of the things is that we hear a lot about the value of diverse teams in our various organizations. And we have ROIs around that. We have SLAs around that. But talk to us a little bit about some of the intangible benefits that a company might see by ensuring that they have diverse teams.
Yeah, I'll take that one,
Okay, go for
Adam.
it.
I've been the leader of diverse teams, and I although the idea may scare people when they hear you talk about it, what it means is bringing different people to the table who bring different experiences and different ideas, different backgrounds. And by the very nature of that, you don't have all the people in the room saying the same thing. So you get different ideas. You have if you can create a collaborative space to do that, those ideas and perspectives will challenge the norm. And and I have seen it over and over again, just raise the bar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's interesting about that, in marketing, we use a term, don't market to yourself, right? For us, the ability to bring in different backgrounds, different points of view, that just makes us better. Because if we're all in the room and we all agree and we all have the same, life stories, the end product isn't as good as when you can have a mixture of experiences and viewpoints and items such as that.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that, what everybody has shared, is that when you have a diverse team, you really see innovation from that diverse thinking just exponentially, and different thinking leads to different results, and typically it's better results. The other fun fact I was going to share, Adam, is I also coach both of my girls' softball teams. And so, diversity is both professionally, but also personally too. And so making sure you're not looking for the same type of person on your team is important.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. So thinking about that, right? So, and thinking about these teams, I was reading an article about high functioning teams, and the author said, if you want to hire a diverse and high performing team, you have to have intention behind that desire. So talk to us a little about intentionality on your D&I initiatives and hiring, right? Because I talk about this a lot, especially in the D&I space, we have to be intentional. We have to understand what the outcome is that we expect to be able to put that plan in place and have it be effectual. So talk to us a little bit about intentionality behind putting these teams together.
Yeah, we certainly have it at JPMorgan. So we have intentionality with regards to diverse slates. So when we are hiring people, we have the expectation that those slates will be diverse. And that's not just male, female, but also includes the intentionality around people of color. We have groups, we have organizations within the firm that help to promote development of talent that is from every ethnicity as well as women. So to create that pipeline, we go out and recruit from various universities that have, we have, from HBCUs or historically Black colleges. We go to different universities that will clearly give us a diverse slate in our hiring, all the way from analysts to the top of the house. We're looking at those practices and enforcing them. And we have reporting around it and ownership by our leadership.
Yeah, I would, in addition to looking on campus for us from a recruiting perspective, we also are building relationships with external organizations. So for us, a big one is NABA, National Association of Black Accountants, right? And so just really looking similar to Barbara, part of our DEI council, there's a subcommittee that tracks all of that, both from what we have within our employee group from diversity, as well as how we're doing in promoting them. So it's hiring all the way up through promotion, and track all the way up to partner, and making sure that we're giving them the same opportunities as we are within the firm.
Mm-hmm.
And for us at Payrailz, we're probably the smallest organization on this virtual. We're 44 employees, and so we're probably a lot less formal than you folks, but diversity is top of mind for us. So when we're talking to recruiters and as we bring people in, it's a mixture of, hey, I know this person who would make a great fit for Payrailz. And so while we're less formal, it is top of mind for us.
Mickey, your comment makes me think about culture, right? So it doesn't matter if you're 44 people or 240,000 people like us. It's what culture do you want? What's important to you? What are you going to be intentional about? And so we're all doing the same things, maybe in different ways, but we're all making the same impact.
It's interesting because we were a newer company, and so while we could be classified as a startup, we're proud of our experience. We're proud that we're not learning on the job. But when you get to start over, you don't have the legacy. And so for us, we wanted to start a company around 3 pillars. And, we've heard, here's our 10 creeds or our 12. For us, we wanted 3 pillars: respect, transparency, and integrity. If we live through those pillars, and that automatically translates into our efforts around diversity. So I love that comment. It's you have to have the culture where everyone is welcome.
Yeah.
Oh, do we lose Ann?
I was just going to add, Adam, you bring that up, Mickey, and the culture at Wipfli is making a lasting impact in both the communities and with the clients that we work with. And we purposefully say communities to make sure that we're bringing in that diverse perspective. And we talk a lot about having an outward mindset. And so not thinking about ourselves, but, how does the other person feel, whether, it's diverse or not? And are we making sure that we're keeping that in the forefront of everything that we do?
So I think this is really interesting and something that kind of comes to my mind. So I'm hearing that we have intentionality and we have culture. So did intentionality drive the culture for your D&I, or did the culture drive the intentionality behind the D&I? How do you guys view that?
From our perspective, it's certainly, we designed the culture. So the culture drives, again, going back to our pillars, and we're always checking, are we living the pillars? And when you live the pillars, it's almost a natural fit.
I would agree. I think the culture drives the intentionality, but it is fluid, right? So if you look at the things that are going on in the world today, particularly in our country, some of the racial issues that are being elevated, it drives even more intentionality. So we are looking as leaders at our firm saying, are we doing enough? Have we been doing enough? Where can we improve? And so it is continually growing and developing.
Yeah. Same here. We probably put our DEI efforts on steroids as of late. Just looking at, are we doing enough, to Barbara's point? And, there were things that as a firm, partners and employees and associates spoke up and said, we think we need to do more here. And it included, we always do a day of service. And so this year's day of service, albeit somewhat in locations had to be virtual, we tried to make sure we focused on those that underserved, and making sure that we're pulling that in and really saw that jump start here because of the recent events. So I think it's both. Culture drives, but you have to pivot. You have to react to what's going on.
Yeah, it's not a static strategy for sure. So kind of thinking about strategy though, as you're looking at 2021 and beyond, who's responsible in your organizations for putting your D&I strategies together? And then how are they carried out or communicated through your company? I think that's a very important piece is, we can make all the plans we want to, but how it's actually communicated and how it's actually carried out throughout our firms is a really important piece. So talk to us a little bit about strategy and deployment.
Yeah, I'll start. So we have really 4 layers to our strategy, our DEI strategy. It starts with our DEI Council, which is made up of our firm leadership as well as selected partners from within the firm. And the focus of the council is just to make sure that we have support and obviously funding for our initiatives, but that support needs to come from the top down. And through the council, we then created 2 layers underneath there. One of those is the DEI director. And the DEI director helps to set that strategy, but also to enact upon that strategy. So Adam, you said it perfectly, right? You can have a strategy, but if you aren't deploying that strategy throughout your organization, it's really just a sheet of paper that sits there. And then we have what we call business resource groups underneath those. So those are designed to be advocates to amplify the voice of groups within the organization. So one of them is what we call WOW, Women of Wipfli. I actually am the executive sponsor for that group. We have one multicultural or people of color, veterans group, LGBTQ plus group, you name it. And so really it's folks who spoke up that had a passion for those and wanted to make sure that their voices were heard throughout the organization. And then the fourth and probably most important one is everybody within the organization. So, we can have all of these great support mechanisms and all of these, events and communications, but it's the people underneath that, are responsible for making sure that everybody feels welcome within the organization, that we're soliciting and most importantly, listening to the differences of thought throughout the organization. And we've done we just recently finished unconscious bias training throughout the organization to make sure that we're pulling that in as well. So that's what we've done thus far. But again, it's ever changing based upon what we're seeing going on and reacting to responses from the firm.
And at Payrailz, so that comes under my responsibility as chief of staff. And so it's a combination. As a smaller company, we work with a PEO that handles our HR. And so they're providing diversity training and all types of training that come with that. We're working with recruiters as we do new hirings. And then the final part is we like to think, again, we talked about our pillars, but we like to think we call ourselves a family. And you can't, so for us, we actually have an employee committee. We call it the Culture Club. And that represents people throughout the organization. We get together and we're always asking are we living the culture? Are we living the type of environment that people can be very proud of, and having Payrailz be a great place to work? So it's that combination that constantly keeps us in check.
I'd say at JPMorgan, since we are so large, our structure is large, right? So we have a head of diversity and inclusion who reports into our operating committee. So this is a very strong business initiative, and we are all coming together as business leaders to create an ecosystem that is focused on diversity and inclusion. So, what's our lending look like? What's our business lending versus our home lending? What is our Supplier Diversity program, which I am now responsible for? How does that come together with our recruiting efforts and our hiring efforts and the ability to attract talent? Are we keeping the talent that we attract? What talent, how are we doing from a diversity and inclusion perspective at every level of the firm? Again, from managing director, operating committee down to the analysts. So, and we do have business resource groups as well in all the areas that Anna listed. So we're trying to create a business-focused ecosystem with the also social support that people need, so that it is a fabric that runs through every part of JPMorgan, and trying to connect all those dots together to make sure that we are not just internally focused, but building wealth in communities and making a difference in the communities that we serve, and more intentional about internally reflecting our client and customer base.
That's excellent. So I'm going to kind of ask Mickey this question because I've heard Barbara and Anna talk about BRGs or ERGs. Essentially we have groups that help us break down some of these barriers or perceived barriers really between whether it's generations or orientations or ethnic backgrounds. But Mickey, being an organization of 44, how do you see that? I mean, how do you guys help manage that other than, you have your intentionality behind you, you have your 3 pillars behind you, but do you have a need or do you foresee a need, or is there kind of an informal need for like some more of these more formal ERG groups that we see in larger corporate America?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So as a smaller organization, it's almost like a crawl, walk, run approach.
Mm-hmm.
When you're smaller, managing it, I'm not going to say that it's easier, but it's very visible.
Right.
A company of 44, things don't get lost. So at the point of where we are as a company, we don't, in the future, I see it, but at this point, it's a lot less formal than, say, Anna or Barbara are dealing with.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you. So we touched on it just briefly about the social unrest that we've seen strife our country recently. So what I would like for us to discuss is how did your company respond to that social unrest? And why did leadership want to respond to that social unrest, right? We've kind of opened up by talking about intentionality. That's kind of the theme that's running through this talk as we're going through it. So there has to be intentionality even in our responses to something as important as what was going on in our country. So talk to us a little bit about your response and what leadership's intentions and why they wanted to have that response put out.
Well, for us at Payrailz, again, a smaller company, the first thing you do is you acknowledge it. And again, as a smaller company, we can get 44 people, on a Zoom call and just talk about it, which is what we did. We do a weekly thing here that especially because of COVID and we had to go remote, we didn't want to lose that family atmosphere. So we created something here called Yappy Hour. And it's a time for us to get together. We cannot, rule number 1, you cannot talk about work. So you have to talk about issues. We talk about things because we're diverse. We'll talk about things like, in Connecticut, you can get something called fluff, and they don't know what it's like in South Dakota. So that's kind of the funny part of it. But the other part of it, we can as a family get together and talk about issues. So it's something that came up. We acknowledged it. We talked about it. Again, culture part gives us a line in some sense, but really it's the ability to just sit as a family and talk about it. We thought that went a long way.
I agree with you. I'm a proud employee of JPMorgan Chase and never prouder than at this time. It was our response was led by our CEO, Jamie Dimon, who sent out an email to all employees and spoke about it and reinforced that this is important to our firm, that we are a diverse and inclusive firm, and this, any racial inequity would not be tolerated. So that set the tone. That also opened the door for many conversations. So like Mickey's having a conversation of 44, we've probably had thousands of those. We call them real talks. And they have been intentional to bring groups of people together to talk about how they're feeling about this, to make it okay to bring your full self to work and talk about what's going on, how this has impacted you personally. People, sharing their own personal stories in relation to what's going on. And it has been invigorating. I mean, I think that those real conversations where we connect at a human level, not based on stereotypes or judgment, but just sharing either side of the conversation, have been really effective in opening the door. And we are intentional about keeping those conversations going.
Very nice.
Yeah. And I would just add, so we did something very similar to what Mickey and Barbara talked about from the conversations. The other thing we did was, donated money to local nonprofits that were focused on improving the educational or business opportunities, again, for the underserved groups. And then went out and then, like I mentioned earlier, intentionally chose those groups to do part of our charity or community service days within each of the different regions. And so I would say the local unrest within all of the locations across the footprint really put, like I mentioned earlier, sped up our DEI plans and efforts across the firm. And our managing partner, Kirk Gressens, was having at some points weekly conversations with the organization around everything. So.
And I'll add, besides what I referred earlier about looking at what are we doing and creating a new plan to enhance that, we also looked at how this was impacting our employees at every level, and even economically at our lowest level. We had employees who were impacted because their neighborhoods were being rioting, their grocery stores were missing. We went so far when we learned about those things to provide food, to provide shelter, transportation for employees who were personally impacted by some of the unrest.
Wow, that's absolutely great. I love hearing those type of stories as we as a nation face this together. So one of the common themes in TAG is innovation through diversity. So my question to the panel is, as you look into your companies, how do you see this innovation through diversity playing out? It doesn't have to just be in the tech space, right? I mean, we see innovation along all sorts of different lines and processes and the way that we interact, but we do have to innovate, especially in today's new normal, or the now normal, as Mickey said up front. So talk to us a little bit how D&I and diversity is really playing out to help you drive innovation at different levels in your firms.
Well, for us, again, where we're coming from in the life cycle of our company, we need this company to be innovative. So we just can't talk about it. We have to walk about it, right? So everything we're doing is trying to think outside of the box. For us, we brought a lot of experience, but we had this great opportunity. And the great opportunity is if you could take a blank piece of paper and start over, what would you do differently? So we can bring in all this experience. We all come from different companies and things like that. And you'll often hear, we had done this at a former company, but we thought it's a better way to do that. So with everything, our approach is with that blank piece of paper, when you can do things now, knowing the experience that you had, how can you improve it? That leads to our innovation.
Yeah, I think being part of a global company, it's a natural for us too, right? Because you have leaders coming from all over the world with different perspectives to look at how we do things better, particularly as we hope to come out of COVID and look at how has this impacted our future state of working at home, working from the office. What does that mean for our employees? Culturally, what does it mean? We're asking all those questions, and we have people from every background all over the world on working streams asking those things so that we can be as innovative as possible and leveraging what we know internally and externally, suppliers, to see what they're doing, also to bring different perspectives to make it a great place for our employees and our customers.
Yeah, and not to double down on, we're doing many of the same things, but to look externally, one of the things I'll just share, once we announced our BRGs, we got quite a bit of inbound traffic to the firm from organizations that also supported those groups or were there to help promote businesses within those groups. So an example, the LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce up here in Illinois reached out to us and said, hey, can we please, partner with you or, work together to help organizations that, are serving this community. And so I think internally it's, important, but then it's the external that also is making a big difference in what we're seeing.
Yeah, just to talk about the external. Proud of the banks and credit unions in our industry. We're seeing things like when we get an RFP now, they want to know, are you thinking about diversity? What are you doing about diversity? I mean, these are, they're looking for technology, yet some of their questions is showing what their mindset is, that it's important to them to work with partners that are also, again, like-minded in some way, thinking in the same direction.
Vicki, we are definitely doing that. That's one of our questions of our suppliers or potential suppliers. What's your diversity plan? We want to do business with companies that align with our what's important to us.
That is excellent. So as we're kind of coming down to the last 10 minutes or so of our panel, I do want to remind the audience that if you have any questions, please make sure you type them in. And to our producer, too, I want to make sure we aren't missing any questions from our audience as we move into kind of some of our closing questions here. But I'm also hearing a little bit of a tone of supplier diversity, which, Barbara, I know that is near and dear to both of our hearts because that's our specialties inside our respective banks. So let's talk about supplier diversity for just a minute, because that is part of the overall D&I strategy, isn't it? To make sure our supplier base represents the communities in which we serve as well. So when thinking about that, and I know we probably have some fantastic entrepreneurs on the call with us that have some new fintechs that maybe our respective organizations would be interested in. What is the process for a diverse supplier to reach out to you, and then briefly, what would the onboarding timeline look like? Just kind of setting real expectations for people listening to us talk.
So we meet, suppliers or potential suppliers in a lot of ways through events like this one, through networking, through our lending teams or people that are customer facing. So we have a lot of different ways, but you can reach out, to JPMorgan through our supplier diversity team. Let us know what you do. What we do is then we'll register you into our system, see if there's a potential alignment for what we do or what we plan to do. So one of the things we are doing is trying to look ahead. What are we doing today? What's our goal in the businesses 3 years, 5 years from now, to begin to develop relationships with potential suppliers early, so that we can bring them through the process. It can be a lengthy process depending on the type of product that you bring to us, or if you hit it at the right time and we're looking for a certain product, it can be a quicker process. But I would say that we are very focused on diverse firms right now. And so now's the time. If you feel like you have a product that might be a solution to what JPMorgan needs, reach out to us through our website and let's start a conversation.
That's amazing. I know that for the newly formed Truist Bank, it's the exact same thing. We have our same portals through the Ariba Discovery Network. And very much like JPMorgan Chase, we're very interested in talking to the new upcoming fintechs that are out there. Doesn't mean it might not be a fit right away, but we would love to have the conversations at least. So excellent. So also kind of stay on this topic for just another second. Black tech is also another thing that we're starting to see talked about a lot in this industry, especially after what has gone on inside our country. So are your firms making any sort of special efforts towards the Black tech community, or outreach to them, or helping in the development of some of the new technologies that are out there by our Black and African-American owned firms?
So we have, I'll jump in quick here, Adam. As a firm, we've tasked each of our business resource groups, again, not only to look internally, but to look externally. So all of our BRGs, whether it's LGBTQ or people of color, multicultural, or even women of Wipfli. I know Enrich Her was one of them that won the, was a finalist for TAG, right? So we're looking for all of those organizations to help them, advise them through the, startup process, and help them to reach their strategic priorities and really gain that alignment, again, both internally and externally. And so, yes, we are looking to, help out those Black tech, but, also the others as well.
Sure. Great.
Yeah, and I'd say we, as a supplier diversity team, there is a focus on identifying technology companies, and specifically Black technology companies. So yes, we definitely this is an area of interest and focus for us right now, and we're setting goals around it. Yes.
And for Payrailz, again, we come at it at a different angle
excellent.
because we're a fintech. And so for us, our customers become our partners. And again, as I said, I'm very proud of the approach that banks and credit unions in the industry are taking. So
that is fantastic. Yeah, it all depends. We all sit in different areas of it. So that's a very interesting perspective for sure. So, sometimes the whole conversation about D&I can be a very kind of uncomfortable one for people to have, especially for those that aren't like ourselves, that, it is our roles inside our firms, right? It's part of the responsibilities we have as advocates inside our firms. I know that for me personally, with everything that has gone on, I've had to have several very semi-uncomfortable conversations about white privilege and what does that really mean and what is really being communicated through that statement. So talk to us a little bit about some of the conversations maybe you've had that have been a little bit on the uncomfortable side and how you navigated them to kind of help our audience understand how to handle these topics when they do come up, because it is one that can be very sensitive.
So I'll take that one. I'm a Black woman. Not many people know that by looking at me. You may not have guessed that, but I am. And so this is not just new to me to have this conversation. These are conversations I've lived for all of my life, and personal to me, but also in leadership. But I'm very much involved in the leadership of how we have these conversations at work right now, and providing a safe space, whether it's one-on-one. I've given my team, which is a very diverse team, an opportunity to lead discussions for people to share personal experiences. I think that what is important, frankly, is that we don't get hung up on lingo, like white privilege or slogans or anything, but we see each other as people, and that we talk through what the differences are, what the concerns are, and care and listen. We live in a world that's very divided right now. And so I think if we will just give each other space to talk, assume the best of every person instead of the worst, and just be real and humble in our discussions, I've seen some powerful results. And I've gotten feedback from people who, whether they've been in a 5-person conversation or a 25-person conversation, say this was probably one of the most powerful conversations I've had since I began my working life. So I think people want to have it. It's very new to bring that personal piece to work like this, or at least, for many of us, but it's important. And I think we just have to be honest with each other and let that be okay, so we can talk through our differences and get to a place where we can celebrate them.
Yeah, if I can just add on to that, because you're so spot on that. And the other thing is to just create a safe environment. And to me, I use the term, it's okay to agree to disagree. Because when you agree to disagree, then you can have a real conversation and you learn something. We all bring a series of life experiences, whether someone's female or Black, or in my case, Jewish or whatever. It's taking those life experiences and being able to talk about it in a very safe way where people are like, I didn't realize that. So I think there's this, people sometimes are naive because it's not, people can't just go up and ask a question, but in a conversation, as they start to talk about life experiences, people can then be free to learn and say, oh, I didn't understand that. So.
Yeah. And I'll just, add on to what Mickey and Barbara shared. We're doing a lot of the same things. The conversations are tough during these times right now, both from, whether it's from white privilege or, to Mickey's point, we have a very large Jewish population within the firm who, had some strong feelings around a lot of these things. And just understanding it. And we're very grateful. We thankfully started our unconscious bias training before all of this started. But again, that was another one of those things where we put it on steroids and amped it up and said, we need to get this out faster, quicker to everybody. Because I think once we understand that we all have this unconscious bias within us that just comes out at times like this, that we can maybe better see the person sitting next to us from their shoes, then maybe we wouldn't have otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is excellent.
Adam,
I think
one of the things that I have learned in this too is it's sometimes not thinking it's just not knowing, right? So I think sometimes when a person sits next to you and they're different, they're Jewish, they're Black, they're Latinx, but they have your same job, you also assume the best, right? So I've seen jaw drops during these conversations to say, oh, Barbara, you're a managing director, you're an executive with JPMorgan, and yet you've had some of these experiences. Your husband just driving from work through Beverly Hills has been picked on and wound up laying on the ground and had to, and did nothing to drive home from because he's a Black man, or your children get stopped, or you've had to talk to your children. Aren't they the same as my children? So I think this has brought out a level of awareness that we didn't share. And I'll just be vulnerable. It made me realize that as a person of color, I share those experiences with other people of color. We do it as a protective mechanism so that it's like, oh, protect your children. Let me tell you what I can tell you so that your children are protected or mine. We don't generally share it with our friends who are not people of color because we don't want to relive those things again. It's bad enough to to live through something that was an inequity just because of your race. It's another thing to share it with somebody who's different, who says, you just have a chip on your shoulder, or things aren't like that anymore. So I think what these conversations have done has raised awareness that these are not one-off things, that our colleagues who are different from us are going through some things that we never knew they were going through. And so I think that transparency is powerful.
It's such a good point. I think all of us, we come into life, we talked about our life of experiences, right? And we all have what we'll call a family of origin. It's how we were raised, where we were raised, all that type of thing. And if we could just give each other the benefit of the doubt, sometimes you have to think that sometimes things are just not intentional. It really comes from a lack of having discussed it, or a lack of just not knowing. And I always find giving people the benefit of the doubt and just talking about it, you'll always get people to say, I did not realize that. Because again, it's not part of their life experience. So we just have to be open to share life experience. And so thank you, Barbara, for sharing your story, right? Because most of us will sit back and go, I just can't imagine that. And there's nothing wrong with us, not because it's not part of our life experience, but now it's almost eye-opening, if you will.
Wow. I mean, this is absolutely amazing. This panel, I think all of us could go on for like another hour if they let us. But unfortunately, we have come up against the end of our time together. I want to thank Mickey, Anna, Barbara. Thank you for that last little bit and opening up and letting us all know that we have to have real conversations, right? I think that's what comes down from this panel is we have to be intentional. We have to have direction. And we also have to be open and willing to share our own experiences and receive them as well to make any D&I strategy, whether it is a huge company like a Chase or a Truist, or as small as a Payrailz, and in between all of us where the Wipflis of the world are. This is an important topic that we have to all drive the conversations and are parts of them too. So to my panel, thank you so much. To the audience out there on the virtual time, thank you for giving us some of your time and joining us on this very important conversation. If this is the type of stuff that you really want to dig into more and be part of, as chair of the TAG D&I Society, I invite you to come and join us and continue to have these type of conversations as we try to push these conversations forward. Again, thank you to everybody and have a great rest of your conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.